By the end of this video, you'll have a first chapter that you can put out on a webcomic site like Webtoons to be able to share your webcomic with the world. So first of all, what is the real purpose of Chapter 1? Chapter 1 should introduce your protagonist, establish the basic setting, the premise, and give readers a reason to care. As well as this, you want to also, later in the first chapter, introduce the main conflict or goal and establish the overall tone of the story. You want to provide enough information to understand the story without over-explaining everything. So leave some questions unanswered and allow the chapter to build mystery and intrigue in your story. Next, you want to start with the core idea. So before writing, really define who your protagonist is, because your protagonist is the one telling your story and guiding your story. So really understand what they want, what is stopping them from achieving this, and why this goal matters. And that is going to help your readers to begin to care about this character and what will happen to them. Now, before we get into the art of the webcomic, which is only part of the visual storytelling, we really want to break down what is going to happen in your first chapter. You see, a story is usually broken down into a simple 6-step structure, and this includes the beginning, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And this story structure not only applies to the story as a whole, but it also applies to your single chapter. So every chapter you create should still follow this 6-step structure, and this will ensure that your readers will maintain interest throughout the course of your chapter. Even if it is small, it needs to build curiosity in your audience. So introduce the protagonist and their normal life, disrupt it with a problem, show them reacting and making a decision, increase the consequences, and finish with a new problem or a confrontation which twists what your protagonist thought and believed in a new direction. So now you've broken down what you want to happen in this chapter, and you have a better idea of the overall story as well, using the 6-step story structure. Now what you really want to do is you want to know how you are going to open up this webcomic chapter, because in these webcomic chapters, you want to get your readers hooked as soon as possible. You want to make them interested in the world you're creating. So start with something that creates curiosity, such as an interesting character, a strange event, an immediate problem, a mystery, or an action that reveals more about who your characters are and the world they're living in. So avoid starting off the story with a long description of the world or what is happening. Try to instead get to the core of your story and reveal the main conflict or obstacle at the beginning, which will make your audience want to keep reading more to see what will happen in the continuing chapters. Now, when you're creating a webcomic, this is actually a vastly different process than creating a novel. You see, when you create a novel, you are communicating more through descriptions. And while you are showing through the writing, you are also allowing a lot of the descriptive text to present the story you're telling. When you're creating a webcomic, art should do most of the storytelling. In art, you should allow the expressions, body language, composition, environments, colors, and panel transitions to reveal a lot of the information. So before adding dialogue to your webcomic, ask yourself whether the reader can understand this panel visually. Can they understand what was happening if there were no dialogue at all? If the artwork can communicate something on its own, then let it do so instead of explaining too much through the dialogue. You need to find a good balance between revealing information through the artwork and also allowing the characters to speak through dialogue. So now that we've talked about how to plan out the first chapter of your webcomic in the best possible way, let's now talk about the other side of creating a good webcomic, and this is the art. The art is at the heart of your webcomic, and so we need to think about how you are presenting your artwork. And for this tutorial, I'm going to be focusing on Webtoon because this is where I'm uploading my own webcomic, but if you want to upload it on another platform, make sure to read about what the platform's resolutions and guidelines are. So in Webtoons, the current canvas guidelines for individual uploaded images are 800 to 1280 pixels. I recommend for the best high quality artwork, you should work at a higher resolution than this and then reduce the artwork later in order for it to be compressed on the platform. Always check the final version at 800 pixels wide to make sure that the text and details remain readable on any device. Now, when you're creating a webcomic, this is actually different than creating a regular comic or a graphic novel. You want to really think about it vertically rather than reading from left to right or right to left. Webtoons is designed for vertical scrolling rather than traditional pages, so think of the episode as one long vertical story. The vertical storytelling method can allow you to pace the scenes and panels in a very different way than you would with other mediums. So instead of designing around pages, use the panels, vertical spacing, scene transitions, and larger reveals to control how the reader experiences the story. So when you begin creating your webcomic, the first thing you want to do, once you have a script and you have an idea of what you want to present in your first chapter, you want to thumbnail the chapter. So create small rough draft artwork before starting the final artwork. Use them to plan where you want to place your panels, character positions, camera angles, actions, speech bubbles, and pacing. You can do this in one long canvas if you want, or you can break it down into smaller individual pages. I would recommend using a longer page and then cutting it down into the 800 by 1280 pixel limit that is required by Webtoon for uploading the individual images. So don't worry about making the images in this stage look good yet. Focus on whether the story is clear, the reading order makes sense, and that important moments have enough space to really have a strong impact on the people who are reading it. So remember that we are building up suspense along with the chapter. So as the readers continue to scroll, they should learn more and more information should be revealed. Small panels can work really well for quick actions and reactions, while large panels can emphasize important moments, revealing information, emotions, or establishing shots. Most people will see your comic on a small screen, so check that your artwork is at its final display size. So make sure the dialogue is readable, speech bubbles are clear, facial expressions are visible, and any important objects or details don't become too small. So design for the size that the reader sees it at, not the size you draw it at. So draw at a higher scale and higher resolution, and then minimize it or compress it to upload onto Webtoons. When you're creating a webcomic, the characters themselves are the ones who are telling and presenting the story. So you really want to ensure that your characters are presenting this story in the best possible way. Good character art isn't just about having attractive characters. Characters also need to act and tell the story through their emotions and body language. When you're beginning your first chapter of your webcomic, you also want to have a lot of establishing shots where you establish the setting and the world. You don't need to go over the top with this, but backgrounds do establish the world and the story you're creating. So use backgrounds for establishing shots and important locations, and then simplify them when dialogue or character emotion is more important. You don't need to fully render every single background. Use detail where it contributes most importantly to your story. Most webcomics are in color. Mine personally is in black and white because I originally created it to be more like a manga. But whether you're using colors or more of a monochromatic color scheme, you can use it to your advantage to present the story as well. For color comics, establish a consistent palette and use color and lighting to support the mood and draw attention to the most important elements in the chapter. For black and white comics, focus on the values, the contrast, the blacks, and the textures. So when you're creating a black and white comic, make sure that it stands out boldly at a distance. You're able to clearly see the characters against the background, and all of the values work well together. Consistency and readability are more important than adding so much detail to every single panel. Plus, you also want to make sure that it doesn't take too long for you to create every single chapter. Now, when it comes to actually saving your artwork to upload onto a webcomic site, I recommend choosing the file type based on your artwork itself. So JPEG files are useful for detailed color artwork, but it also produces smaller files, which can be helpful if you want to upload it onto a website and you don't want the file to be too big. Whereas PNG files can help you keep really sharp line work and flat colors, but this may also create larger file types. And keep in mind that Webtoon's limit for the overall file size in a single chapter is 20 megabytes. So you want to ensure that all of your individual images come to below that. After you've uploaded it onto Webtoons, always check the final compressed images for any blurry lines, unreadable text, or noticeable color changes while staying within Webtoons file size limits. Now that you've uploaded it, you want to assemble and ensure that all of it is readable. So I would recommend looking at the entire chapter as one long vertical document and then divide it into sections that make sense for you to upload them in. So create a separate file with the page size of 800 by 1280 pixels, and then cut your page and paste it into these file requirements, ensuring that every panel remains readable in this space. This will ensure that Webtoons won't cut it at awkward angles, and it will ensure that all of your important artwork is easily readable to your audience. A good simple workflow to follow when creating your webcomic chapters is to start with the script, create your thumbnails, draw the rough artwork, create the final artwork, add the lettering either in your software or a different one, and then put all the pages together. So cut the pages down into the right size for Webtoons, compress it, and then check it in the Webtoons previewer to ensure that nothing important is cut off. Check the finished episode on both desktop and mobile before publishing, paying attention to the text size, the panel transitions, the reading order, the compression, and whether any sections feel too crowded or rushed when it is being read. And that is how you can create your very first chapter of your webcomic. Remember that your first chapter doesn't need to be perfect. All of these little elements like your art style, your pacing, your use of backgrounds and storytelling will improve naturally as you make more comics. And in fact, when I created my own webcomic, which is a graphic novel of over 500 pages, I didn't have a lot of experience, but along the way I learned a lot, and it really helped me to level up my own storytelling skills. And so this is the same case when creating a webcomic. I actually think creating a webcomic or a long form of visual storytelling like graphic novel or manga is one of the best ways to improve your art and storytelling skills. The most valuable goal at this stage, of course, is to finish your first chapter and learn from it, and then you can use the things you learn in the chapters that follow it. That is the most important element of a good first chapter. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to make the readers want to keep reading more. So by the end of this video, you should have your first chapter ready to go on Webtoons. If this video helped you to kickstart your webcomic series, I would love to hear about it. Share the name of your webtoon in the comment section down below, and let's support each other as small creators. Thank you for joining me in today's video, everyone. It was so much fun being able to talk about how to create a great webcomic with you. If you need any help along the way for your webcomic and for future chapters, check out my website Midnight's Cross. It has resources, templates, and workbooks that can take you through every step of the process, from building amazing characters, plotting your story, and bringing it all together into an amazing book. You have a brilliant story, and I want to help you create it. Thank you again for joining me in today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!